Welcome to the debate. When we think of the absolute apex of human wealth, we usually expect it to be loud, right? Like it should take up physical space.
Oh, absolutely. You picture like sprawling real estate portfolios or,
Right, massive multinational conglomerates.
yeah, fleets of super yachts anchored off the Mediterranean.
Exactly. These are enormous, highly visible manifestations of capital. And they require, hundreds of people just to maintain them. It's wealth expressed through sheer volume.
Right.
But the moment you step into the world of magnificent jewels, and specifically the ultra-elite market of colored diamonds, that entire rulebook just goes out the window. Suddenly, the scale of physics collapses. You are looking at 40, 50, maybe even $70 million, all concentrated into one beautifully faceted stone.
It's crazy to think about.
Right? If you're listening to this on your commute right now, just look at the T's in your ignition. Imagine something half that size that costs literally more than the entire highway you're currently driving on.
Yeah.
It is this unfathomable density of value, something you can close your fist around and just slip into a coat pocket.
It really is the ultimate distillation of capital. I mean, it's entirely portable, it's absolutely discreet, and historically, it's been the playground for the most aggressive gladiatorial auction battles on the planet. We are talking about a theater of ego, right? Where the world's most powerful individuals used public auction houses to basically flex their financial dominance over one another.
Which makes our analysis of the current market data so fascinating, because that gladiatorial arena is suddenly quieting down. When I first looked at the Christie's and Sotheby's Magnificent Jewels auction data spanning from 2016 to 2025, I thought there was a typo in the spreadsheet.
You and me both.
Right? It reveals a staggering, just undeniable drop in elite, high-value colored diamond sales. Let me paint the contrast for you really quickly. In 2016, 9 colored diamonds in the top 10 lists fetched over $20 million each. That included the legendary Oppenheimer Blue, which crossed the $70 million mark.
$70 million, incredible.
But fast forward to 2023, and only 4 stones managed to cross that $20 million threshold. And by 2024, the highest stone of the entire year was a pink diamond sitting at just over $13 million.
Yeah.
How do we lose that much value at the top of the market in less than a decade?
Well, the sheer volume of transactions at that stratospheric level is evaporating right alongside those price ceilings. It is a fundamental shift in how the ultra-wealthy are interacting with these assets.
Which brings us to the central question of our analysis today. Is this dramatic decline fundamentally a supply-side crisis caused by the absolute rarity and collector hoarding of top-tier stones? Or is it a demand-side phenomenon reflecting a burst hype bubble, shifting generational tastes, and a massive migration to private sales? I represent the view that this decline is driven primarily by geological scarcity and the absolute refusal of current owners to sell their ultra-rare assets.
And I represent the perspective that the market is experiencing demand fatigue, oversaturation, and a structural pivot away from public auctions toward private sales and alternative gemstones.
Let's start by exploring the pure physical reality of the supply chain. Because the high jewelry market right now is absolutely starved of wow stones. We need to remember that these are miracles of geology.
Right.
A blue diamond gets its color from trace amounts of boron trapped in the carbon lattice billions of years ago. A pink diamond is the result of extreme heat and pressure causing a plastic deformation in the crystal structure itself. It is a freak accident of nature.
Literally an accident, yeah.
You cannot manufacture these assets no matter how much capital you deploy. And the mining data is incredibly clear on this point. Miners are recovering significantly less top-tier material today than they were a decade ago. We are literally moving millions of tons of earth, and the ground is just not yielding these stones at the same historical rate.
And that natural scarcity forces the auction houses to rely almost entirely on secondary market circulation to fill their catalogs. They need current owners to sell.
Exactly. But that secondary market has entered a strict no-sell zone. If we look at the historical data, 10 years ago, 44 pinks, blues, and yellows made the top 10 lists at these magnificent jewel sales. Fast forward a decade, and that number drops to just 28. That is a massive contraction in available inventory.
Sure, but
And just think about stones like the Oppenheimer Blue or the Blue Moon, which achieved $48.5 million. The individuals who acquire these are not flippers looking for a quick margin. They buy for passion and they buy for legacy.
yeah.
When a stone of that magnitude enters a private collection, it is effectively removed from the global supply for a generation. The buyer locks it in a vault, and it will likely not see the auction block for another 20 to 30 years until a generational turnover forces an estate sale. The market isn't failing to price these stones. They simply aren't there to price.
I come at it from a different way. I don't think we can look at the 2016 numbers and call that the baseline of reality. What we saw back then was an unsustainable craze. It was a classic asset bubble, fueled by a wave of newly minted billionaires from emerging markets, and they were all competing for a very specific type of public status symbol.
Okay, but a bubble still requires demand.
Right. But we have to look at the mechanics of that demand. The reality is that the pool of human beings on this earth capable of casually dropping $30 to $70 million on a single stone is incredibly finite. And here is the crucial mechanism driving the drop. That finite pool of buyers has already acquired their ultimate blue or pink diamond. Once you fight the gladiator battle and win the Oppenheimer Blue, you don't necessarily wake up the next morning wanting another one. The ego has been satisfied.
So you believe they've effectively just checked the box on colored diamonds and moved on to other assets?
They checked the box, and the market matured. But beyond buyer fatigue, the auction houses themselves have fundamentally stopped selling the dream effectively. The hype machine that built a 2016 bubble is broken. Just look at the melon blue.
Right. That's a great example.
In 2014, it sold for an astonishing $32.6 million, riding the crest of that wave. When it returned to the market last year, it only garnered $25 million. Now, $25 million is obviously still a fortune, but that is a severe haircut for a supposedly appreciating asset. If this were purely a supply-side crisis driven by extreme rarity, as you suggest, a returning masterpiece like the melon blue should have shattered its previous record because the market is supposedly starved.
Instead, it met a market devoid of hype, lacking the liquidity and the frenzy required to drive those insane bidding wars we saw a decade ago.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on the melon blue's price drop. I don't believe that haircut was a failure of the auction houses to generate hype, nor do I think it proves the demand is dead. I think it is a symptom of a much broader issue regarding when and why these owners actually choose to sell.
Okay, go on.
If you look closely at the owners who take a loss, they are usually forced to sell due to external financial pressures. The owners who hold the true power, they simply refuse to play the game unless the terms are perfect. To understand this dynamic, we really have to look at the Golconda Blue.
Oh, the one that was abruptly withdrawn last May, right? Right before the gavel was supposed to drop?
That is the one. And for those who aren't familiar with the terminology, Golconda isn't just some fancy marketing name. It refers to these legendary, ancient, now depleted mines in India that produced a level of chemical purity, a type 2A transparency that almost looks like frozen water that we almost never see anymore.
Beautiful stones.
Truly. So this Golconda Blue was slated for a $50 million estimate at Christie's. The marketing was in place, the heavy, glossy catalogs were printed and shipped globally, the worldwide viewing tour was set, and then, at the 11th hour, it was pulled. Why? Because the consigning family looked at the broader economic market, looked at the estimated return, and had a sudden realization they didn't actually need the money.
Right.
They ended up passing it down quietly within their own family structure. I want to offer an analogy here to explain the mechanism at work. We need to stop thinking about ultra-rare colored diamonds as liquid commodities like gold bullion or blue-chip stocks. We need to think of them like masterwork Renaissance paintings. When a Da Vinci or a Caravaggio is purchased by a billionaire, it rarely comes back to the open market. It goes into a permanent family trust. It becomes foundational to a family's historical legacy. By absorbing these geological masterpieces into generational trusts, these families are literally starving the public market of inventory.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You were painting this really romantic picture of these families holding onto these stones because they are sacred, irreplaceable artifacts. But the data tells a story of simple, mathematical market oversaturation.
oversaturation of the rarest items on Earth?
Yes. Let's go back to that 2014 to 2016 window you hold up as the peak. We didn't just see one masterpiece. We saw the Melon Blue, the Oppenheimer Blue, and the Blue Moon all hit the auction block in incredibly quick succession. Every single one of them fetched over $3 million a carat.
Right.
Imagine if the art market suddenly uncovered 3 new Da Vincis and tried to auction them all in the same 18-month window. Do you know what happens to a highly specialized, hyper-illiquid market when you dump that much historic product onto it all at once?
The available capital rushes in to absorb it.
The capital doesn't just absorb it, it exhausts itself. It was too much product too quickly, hitting the exact same incredibly narrow demographic of ultra-wealthy buyers. The burnout wasn't just likely, it was a mathematical certainty. What we are seeing today isn't a permanent starvation of the market because of Renaissance-style family trusts. What we are seeing is the hangover.
A hangover.
Yes, the market is returning to a state of baseline normalcy. The prices we are seeing now, where a magnificent Pank might top out at $13 million, are actually realistic market prices for the modern era. The auction houses aren't failing to find the stones. They are failing to find buyers willing to pretend that $3 million a carat is a sustainable floor for crystallized carbon.
Okay, but if the capital is exhausted and the market is suffering a hangover, how do you explain the absolute immense wealth still circulating at the very top of the luxury sector? We see it in real estate, we see it in contemporary art. The billionaires haven't vanished, and their money certainly hasn't vanished either.
You're completely right. The money hasn't vanished. And honestly, neither have the stones. They are simply changing where they are sold. This brings us to the massive structural shift toward private sales.
Ah,
The public auction block, with its velvet ropes and auctioneers and applause, is no longer the sole arbiter of the diamond trade. If you look at Sotheby's internal data for 2025, their private sales in this high jewelry category actually exceeded any prices they achieved at public auction.
we are talking about the shadow market.
It is a shadow market, and it is thriving because it perfectly aligns with the psychology of today's ultra-wealthy collector. There is a great quote from the source material that sums up this mentality perfectly. True luxury is when you can own it just because you have the money, and no one else is able to put their hands on it.
Right.
For a certain tier of modern billionaire, fighting in a public auction room, having their bids tracked by the press, having their spending habits scrutinized by the public, that isn't luxury. It's a liability.
That makes sense.
Luxury is discretion. Luxury is absolute anonymity. The truly pedigree stones, the ones that would historically anchor a magnificent jewels catalog and generate headlines, they are now being sealed before the auctioneer's hammer ever falls. The major houses have clients with standing, open checkbook wish lists. The moment a top-tier stone surfaces, the broker makes a phone call, and it is quietly placed with a buyer without the public ever knowing it existed.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I will concede that private sales are a growing and vital part of the ecosystem, especially for those seeking anonymity, but the public auction house remains the ultimate, indispensable price discovery mechanism for the entire industry.
How so?
Without the public auction setting a baseline, the private market has no benchmark to price its closed-door transactions. A broker can't ask for $30 million in private if a public auction hasn't proven the market will bear it. And we can see this public machinery still functioning flawlessly if we look at where the center of gravity has shifted geographically. It has moved entirely to Geneva.
Geneva has certainly dominated the sales volume lately, but why there specifically?
Well, over the last decade, Geneva was a purchase point for 130 top 10 stones, completely eclipsing New York at 111 and Hong Kong at 102. And this isn't just, a coincidence of geography or nice scenery. Geneva offers the function of the free port.
Ah, right, the tax havens.
Exactly. For listeners who aren't familiar, a free port is essentially a high-security warehousing complex, often right next to the airport, where assets exist in a customs vacuum. It is a legal tax-free zone. When you are transacting a $30 million physical asset, the import and export tax implications of shipping it across borders are staggering. Geneva neutralizes that friction entirely.
Yeah, it's incredibly efficient.
You can buy the stone and leave it in the Freeport vault without paying a dime in taxes. Furthermore, Geneva aligns perfectly with the Gem Geneve show.
drawing the entire global trade into one city. But most importantly, Geneva has a historical magnetism. It draws out those fresh, old European family collections that haven't been seen in a century. It creates what the experts call auction magic.
But is that magic actually translating into the kind of estimate-smashing sales we used to see? Because the data suggests the exact opposite. Even in Geneva, the final hammer prices are barely scraping the low estimates.
It's true that the relationship to the pre-sale estimates has changed. But again, I trace that back to the mechanics of the industry, not a lack of demand. 10 years ago, pricing a historic blue or pink diamond was more of an art than a science. There were so few data points that houses could put a conservative estimate on a stone just to get the bidding started and watch it fly into the stratosphere.
Right, the frenzy.
Yeah. In 2017 alone, 16 top-tier stones absolutely smashed their pre-sale estimates. But today, the competition between Christie's and Sotheby's is incredibly intense. If Christie's pitches a conservative estimate to win a consignment from a wealthy family, Sotheby's might pitch a significantly higher one to guarantee the family a better return.
So they're over-promising.
This forces everyone to price the stones much closer to their actual market value right out of the gate just to secure the business. The illusion of skyrocketing values has been eliminated by competitive efficiency and accurate pricing, not by a dead market.
Let's look closely at how that competitive efficiency is actually applied across different categories of diamonds, because it reveals a profound vulnerability in your supply-side argument. If we look at yellow diamonds, the pricing strategy is entirely inverted.
Yellows are a fascinating counterpoint, I agree, because the supply dynamics and the geology are entirely different. Yellow diamonds get their color from nitrogen impurities, which is incredibly common in the earth compared to the rare conditions needed for pinks and blues.
Exactly. And the material uses a brilliant, highly visual analogy to explain how this impacts the market. They say, if you look at the fancy colored diamond category, yellows are a giant golf umbrella of supply, whereas blues and pinks are the tiny bodega mini umbrellas.
That is a great analogy.
Right? There is an absolute plethora of yellows on the market. The supply is heavily flooded. So to combat this oversupply, the auction houses intentionally manipulate the estimates downward. Let's say you have a 10-carat yellow diamond whose true mathematical market value is $15,000 a carat. The auction house will intentionally list it at $10,000 a carat.
To start a bidding war.
Why? Because they have to artificially lower the barrier to entry to manufacture bidding excitement. They have to trick the room into a frenzy to make the stone look like a deal, because the true scarcity just isn't there.
But that is standard auction psychology, though. You bait the hook to get the paddles in the air.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered what that actually tells us about the broader buyer psychology? If auction houses have to resort to artificially depressing estimates just to get people to raise their paddles for yellow diamonds, it points to a much larger systemic demand issue. And this is where we have to talk about generational lifestyle changes, which I think is the real driver of this market drop.
Okay.
The buyers of today are fundamentally different from the buyers of 2014. Look at the data on how the stones are cut. The pear shape, which historically dominated the top 10 lists because its faceting is excellent at holding and deepening color, has seen a massive decline.
It has.
In 2018, there were 16 pear-shaped diamonds in the top lists. By 2024, there were only 4. Meanwhile, we are seeing an unexplained renaissance in marquise cuts. Why? Because the pear shape feels like old money. It looks like something an 80s matriarch would wear. The marquise, on the other hand, spreads its weight from edge to edge, facing up larger and feeling much more modern. Tastes are shifting rapidly, and the old guard of diamond collectors is not being replaced by a younger generation with the same aesthetic values.
Wait, you believe the younger billionaires simply don't care about diamonds? That seems hard to believe, given the broader luxury spending habits of the tech sector.
I don't think they lack the appreciation for them. I think they don't have the lifestyle for them. Put yourself in the shoes of a 35-year-old tech billionaire or a modern heiress. What are the actual practical occasions in the modern world to wear a $30 million 15-carat blue diamond?
Very few.
They are practically non-existent. The security risks are astronomical. Imagine navigating a crowded charity gala knowing that if the prong on your ring catches on a sequin dress, you just dropped $50 million on the tile floor.
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
You would need a paramilitary security detail just to go to dinner.
The cultural optics of wearing something that ostentatious have shifted dramatically towards stealth wealth, and frankly, a massive blue diamond doesn't align with modern luxury signifiers. Which is why we are seeing a massive structural pivot in the market toward colored gemstones.
You are talking about the shift to rubies, emeralds, and sapphires?
Yes, precisely. The established diamond dealers are explicitly telling us that colored gemstones are now a huge growing part of their business, and they are actively diversifying away from colored diamonds. And the mechanism behind this shift is approachability.
Approachability?
Yeah. The ceiling for an absolute top-tier, world-class sapphire at auction is around $250,000 per carat. That is a fraction of the cost of a blue diamond. For $250,000 a carat, you get the absolute pinnacle of human history in a sapphire, flawless color, perfect origin. For that exact same price in the blue diamond market, you get a tiny, mediocre stone with lower color saturation. Younger buyers are doing the math. They are choosing the absolute pinnacle of one category over the entry level of another. And crucially, they are choosing pieces that can actually wear and enjoy without needing an armored car.
So if we are synthesizing the totality of this data from the plunging volume of $20 million sales to the shifting geography of the Geneva free ports to the rise of the shadow private market and the pivot towards sapphires, we have to decide what this actually means for the future of the asset class.
Right.
From my perspective, despite the changing tastes, the core truth remains unaltered. The absolute ceiling of the high jewelry market is and always will be dictated by absolute geological rarity. The Earth is not making more Oppenheimer blues. The families that hold them are treating them like the Rembrandts of the natural world, locking them away in trusts. We are simply in a holding pattern. Until a new generation inherits these bodega mini umbrella-sized miracles and decides to liquidate to fund their own ventures, the public auction block will remain relatively quiet. The scarcity is real, it is physical, and it is the defining gravity of the market.
And I would summarize by saying that the market has fundamentally and irrevocably restructured around the anxieties and preferences of the modern buyer. The days of public hype bubbles and billionaire gladiators fighting in an auction room just to see their name in the paper are largely behind us. The market hasn't died, it has just grown up.
Grown up.
It has been replaced by the discreet, anonymous efficiency of private sales and a pragmatic shift toward colored gemstones that actually fit the lifestyle of the modern ultra-wealthy. The demand didn't disappear. It just became much smarter, much more calculated, and much quieter.
I think there is a point of convergence we can both agree on, despite our different angles of approach to the data. That explosive Wild West era of 2016 to 2018 auction pricing, where every major stone seemed to break the laws of physics and economics, was a unique historical anomaly.
Oh, absolutely.
It was a perfect storm of newly available geological masterpieces, hitting a highly liquid, highly competitive, ego-driven buyer pool, all at exactly the same time. We are no longer in that era. The ecosystem is now vastly more complex, highly segmented between public and private, and increasingly operating in the shadows of the secondary market.
It is absolutely a maturing market. And looking at this auction data isn't just an exercise in tracking numbers on a spreadsheet for jewelry dealers. It is literally a window into the psychology of the world's elite. It tracks their anxieties, their desires for privacy, their changing aesthetic tastes, and how they choose to anchor their financial legacies in an unpredictable world.
It will be fascinating to watch the upcoming sales calendars to see how this plays out. We will have to keep a close eye on Geneva, particularly the interplay with the tax-free free port zones, and watch how the auction houses continue to lay the groundwork for a new, younger collector base emerging in the Middle East. Whether the next major blue diamond shatters records under the bright lights of a public auction or trades hands silently in a sealed room in a Swiss vault, the tectonic plates of this industry are definitely still moving.
They always are. It's just a question of who's allowed to watch the transaction happen.
Which brings us right back to where we started. It is staggering to think about the sheer weight of global economics, the massive shifts in generational wealth, and the endless complexities of human ego and desire, all being dictated by a tiny piece of crystallized carbon. An entire city's GDP waiting quietly in the palm of a hand.